Let's talk about hair, the fine thread-like strands growing from our skin. Hair is arguably one of our most distinctive and customizable features. We can control and change its colour, length and style, and we can even end up losing our hair. Hello, my name is Ryan and I am on a journey to find out more about hair, specifically hair loss. In this documentary, I am going to explore all known types of hair loss, as well as what causes hair loss and possible treatments and cures for hair loss. So, why am I making this documentary? Well, I have been experiencing hair loss for most of my life, so I would love to raise awareness about hair loss, and I would also love to provide useful information and advice to other people who are losing their hair. So, I'm going to begin by telling my hair loss story. Now, you might be wondering, what hair loss story? Because, as you can see, my hair is growing quite well on the sides and even on top. Well, my hairline might have slightly matured over the years, but no considerable hair loss, and I've had this widow's peak ever since I was a kid. However, as I turn around, you will start to notice hair loss at the back of my head, specifically in the middle, and if I lift my hair up on the left hand side, and also a bald area on the right hand side. The type of hair loss I have is called alopecia areata, which I'm going to discuss more in depth later on. I was diagnosed with the condition a few years ago, but I've had it since I was about 3 years old. At first, me and my family thought it was a birthmark. However, as I started to regrow hair and hair started to fall out in other areas, we noticed that it wasn't a birthmark. So I began doing research as I got older on hair loss, and I discovered and learnt more about alopecia areata, and I thought, that's the hair loss I have. So I went to my doctor to ask for a professional opinion, and he confirmed that it was alopecia areata. My bald areas are more disguised now than they usually are, mainly because my hair is slightly longer than I usually have it, because I can't get it cut because all the barber shops are closed due to the coronavirus lockdown. So let me take you through my hair loss journey from the age of 3 up until now. So, I don't unfortunately have any photos of my hair loss when I was a young child. So the photos you're about to see are dated from 2016 onwards, when I got my diagnosis from the doctor. So I think this photo, the first photo, was not long after that appointment in May 2016, where my hair loss was at its most. So as you can see, I've got the bald spot on the bottom right hand side by my hairline, which I've always have and still have today. And then I've got a few smaller bald areas on the bottom left hand side, and then in the middle I've got a bald area in a rectangle shape. And as you go up in the middle section of my head on the left hand side, there's about a 10p size bald spot as well. So that's where I was experiencing the most hair loss I think I've ever experienced here. And moving on to a few months later, you can see in the second photo I've got a new hairstyle similar to the last one, but I've got my hair slightly longer on top and parted to the side, and on the back and sides I got it faded, and the lower it goes down the more I have it faded, to try and disguise my hair loss a bit, whilst also having sort of like a neatish style that was quite popular at the time. So you can still see my 3 biggish bald spots are still quite noticeable. However, the smaller bald spots on the left hand side by the hairline are not very noticeable. So moving on to the next year, in this photo, which was taken in 2017. Now this is the only photo of my hair loss from 2017. But as you can see, I've got that longish hair on the top, side parted and faded to a bit lower down at the bottom. I'd let my hair grow out for about a month when this photo was taken, and I usually at that time I used to have my hair cut once a month. And as you can see, I have a bald area on the bottom right hand side by my hairline, which I've always had and which I still have today. but I know it's not the best photo, but you can't really see any other bald areas really, apart from if you follow the hairline, it does raise up a bit, where I experienced some hair loss on my actual hairline at that time, so I had my hairline taken up a bit. So moving on now to 2018, and in this photo, again, my hair's a bit shorter on top this time, and I let it grow out a bit longer on the back and side, so it's a bit longer on top, but not as much as it was in the previous photo. And as you can see, I got the same bald spot on the bottom right hand side, and I got another bald spot of a similar size on the bottom left hand side, and as you can see, the hairline is slightly higher in the middle than it is on the left and on the right. As you can see, my hair loss is still quite prominent, but only near the hairline here. And as you can see, the bald spot in the middle and on the upper left hand side have fully regrown at this stage. So this was a little later on in 2018, and as you can see again, I've still got the same bald spot on the bottom right hand side by my hairline, and I've had my hairline taken up a little bit at the bottom because I was experiencing some hair loss on my hairline, so I had it taken up by my barber to make it look a bit neater and to try and hide the hair loss on my actual hairline. And as you can see, slight hair loss on the left hand side, but it isn't as noticeable as it was before because I've had the hairline taken up. It's a bit more difficult to see, but there are two very slight bald spots further up on the right hand side, on the lower right hand side, and on the lower left hand side in line with my ears. So this next photo was taken at the end of the year, and as you can see, again, my bald spots are fully regrown in the mid and on the upper left hand side, and even on the hairline. However, I still got a slight bald area on the left hand side and slight on the right hand side as well. However, it's not as noticeable in this pic because I've actually combed my hair at the hairline to the right hand side to try and conceal it a little bit, just experimenting with new styles. And now we're into 2019 with this picture. This was taken just after I had my hair cut. Again, as you can see, slightly longer on the top, parted to the side, and a little bit shorter at the back and sides, but not very short. I'd say it was a grade 4 on the back and sides. And as you can see, slight hair loss on the bottom right hand side, where my hair's actually regrown a bit on the bottom right hand side, but there's still some hair loss there. And now moving on to this photo, which was taken later in the year. As you can see, my hair is a bit more blended. It's similar length on the top as it is to the bottom and back and sides. I had a clipper cut all over, not the same length, it's slightly longer on top, but not by much. So as you can see, there's slight hair loss, thinning hair at the hairline. My hair's a bit thin, where it's starting to grow back, but not fully. But as you can see, my hairline is completely straight by here because I had a new false hairline put just to try and experiment, to try and conceal my hair loss. But if my hairline would grow naturally by here, you would see again slight bald area on the right hand side and bald area on the left hand side. So moving on to the next photo, which was the final photo I took of my hair loss in 2019. Now, as you can see in this photo, my hair is the same length all over. That's because I cut my hair myself with a clipper. I gave myself a grade 3 buzz cut all over. However, it's slightly longer in this picture because this photo was taken a few weeks after I cut my hair. Now, as you can see, my hair is more balanced in a way because it's the same length all over. And as you can see at the bottom, there is hair loss still noticeable. Not so much bald patches or bald spots, but mainly thinner hair. And especially on the left hand side, and also a little bit on the right hand side, but again, it's not too noticeable. So as you can see, not so much bald spots in this photo, but just thinner hair at the bottom by the hairline. And now moving on to this year, 2020. Now as you can see, my hair is a bit longer in this photo. Basically, I haven't really had it cut since the last photo when I buzzed my hair off myself. I've just been growing it out steadily ever since. And as you can notice, on the bottom left hand side, definitely my hair is thinner, noticeably thinner. I combed it over to the left a bit, and there's a streak of thin hair on the right hand side as well. But other than that, all my other bald spots have regrown. And now moving on to what my hair looks like now, basically. I just try and comb it down, straight down. I don't really pay much attention to it now because although it is noticeable, it's less noticeable than it was when my hair was shorter. And to where I am today, as you can notice in this final photo, So, we've heard my hair loss story, but now we're going to hear about someone else's hair loss story. I've reached out to one of my friends who's been experiencing hair loss, a different type of hair loss to what I'm experiencing, and he's kindly agreed to be interviewed about his hair loss. His name is Sam Ashman, and I know he has done a lot of research into the topic, so let's hear what he has to say. So Sam, thanks for speaking to me. So for the first question, what type of hair loss are you experiencing?
So the type of hair loss I'm experiencing is androgenetic alopecia. That's the medical term for it, but it's more commonly known as male pattern baldness.
Okay, and how do you know it's male pattern baldness?
So typically, male pattern baldness begins in the temples. It's not always the case, but more commonly than not, it is always at the temples. And this is commonly represented in something known as the Norwood scale, as you can see
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
At the minute, I would say that I am at about a Norwood 2 going into a 3 maybe at this point.
When did you start noticing that you were losing hair?
I was around 16 at the time I started noticing, but it was only in a small amount at the time. It wasn't quite visible until I started to get a little bit older. That's when I properly started noticing. But the first sort of signs were around the age of 16. My normal hairline at around this age would have been like this, so it would have been quite straight across
yeah.
there. And I sort of then started noticing, starting to go back when I turned about 16, after I had dyed my hair blonde, and then I cut it all off, and I noticed that it had started to go back.
So you've been losing your hair since you're 16, and you're 19 years old now, yeah?
Yes, at the minute, yeah.
It's taken 3 years. Excuse my maths, I'm terrible. It took me a while to figure that out.
Right.
So it's taken 3 years then for you to start noticing your hair loss to it to progress to a Norwood scale between 2 and 3.
Yeah, around about that, yeah.
And has your hair loss just been at the temples?
At the minute, yeah, it is only at the temples. I do often check the crown, and I haven't really seen anything. Sometimes I look at it and I think that there is loss in the crown, but I think it's more of the fact that for obviously the last few years it's been covered because I had long hair for the past 3 years, which is around the time I started losing the hair. So it's been covered for most of that time, but recently, obviously, I cut it all off, and I did then start to notice that it might have, but I don't think it has. I think it's just the illusion that it didn't look like that when I had longer hair. But the progression, as you can see, that was about 15 there, and so I was just about to turn 16, and then this is me at age 16 there. As you can see, there's sort of a wisp in the hairline there, so that was used to be there. And then this was a year later again. I don't know how well you can see that.
Yeah, I can see it fine.
You can see
I can see the
a
hairline.
little bit more. And then this is I think this is going to be the most. Oh no, it's not the most recent one, but that's 2018. There's a year on again. It's starting to taper a little bit more. And then it hasn't moved much, but this is when I recently had all the hair cut off, and that's it now. As you can see, that's what it currently looks like.
That's what you have now, yeah.
Yeah. So it moved. I'd say it's moved about. I'd say like about an inch, maybe an inch and a half since my my mature hairline, which everybody's premature hair, 2 fingertips below or just above their fingertip there. So that's how you can measure it. The last forehead wrinkle, basically.
So, as you said, your hairline's slightly receded, but it's also matured. So, does everyone experience like a mature hairline?
Yeah, everyone to some degree, even if it's only slightly, male and female mostly all do experience some sort of shift in their hairline between the ages of about 11 to when they're fully grown adult, basically.
Right. And so once you've fully grown then, if it's just a case of a mature hairline, does it stop maturing once you've fully grown?
Yeah, the difference being in, because it's a very important difference to point out what a receding hairline is and a mature, because a lot of guys especially confuse each for the other, basically.
Yeah.
So a receding hairline you could describe as someone like Jude Law here, who, as you can see, has a very similar shaped hairline to myself, and that's him in 1997, and this is him in present day.
So as you see, it's receded and at the temples, but it's still hasn't receded much in the middle part.
In the middle part, yeah. And I think he's experienced some at the back as well, but not a dramatic amount. And then someone who has only just a maturing hairline, we could just see as Leonardo DiCaprio here. He's got just got his widow's
that would be
peak.
Similar to mine.
Similar to yourself, yeah.
Yeah.
So as you can see, it's only moved back slightly. His hairline as a younger man would have been maybe an inch or so down, and it would have looked a little bit straighter, but it's just moved back slightly. It'll probably be like that now for the rest of his life.
So with Jude Law then, obviously his hairline has receded from the first photo to the next one, but it has been a long time, late 90s is over 20 years ago. So
yeah.
Do you think he's had any treatment, or is his hair just not going to go fully bald, or?
You tend to, when you start experiencing male pattern baldness, or any type of hair loss really, it tends to slow down after maybe a decade or so. If you reach the point of, because Jude Law is about in his 40s now, so if you reach that point, you've pretty much experienced most of the bald. I'd say about 80% of the balding that you will experience if you do have it. You're not going to experience much more after that age. It will have taken its most dramatic course by then.
Right, okay, so not everyone who has your type of hair loss then goes fully bald or recedes fully.
No, not everyone, and it happens in different rates as well. Some people's rate is very, very fast, some people's not as fast, and this is all down to different things, such as genetics, diet, lifestyle.
Over the course of my hair loss journey, I have been researching to find out about all known types of hair loss. From my research, I have discovered 18 different types of hair loss. I am now going to list them and give a brief description of each of them. Let's start with one of the most common types of hair loss, which is androgenetic alopecia, also known as male or female pattern baldness. This type of hair loss can affect all genders and both sexes. Androgenetic alopecia mainly affects adults, but it can begin any time after puberty. Now moving on to my hair loss condition, which is alopecia areata. Alopecia areata is an autoimmune condition where the body's immune system attacks healthy tissues, including hair follicles, which causes the hair loss. There are 4 types of alopecia areata. There is alopecia barbae, which is when facial hair falls out in patches. There is typical alopecia areata, which I have, where scalp hair falls out in patches suddenly and without warning. Then there is alopecia totalis, which is when you lose all of your scalp hair. And finally there is alopecia universalis, which is when you start to lose your face, scalp and body hair in patches. There is another type of alopecia called psychiatrical alopecia, but it's also known as scarring alopecia. This type of alopecia occurs when Inflammation destroys hair follicles and causes scar tissue to form in their place. This type of hair loss can occur at any age and affects men and women. Once scar tissue forms, hair doesn't regrow. However, there are a variety of treatments available. There are different forms of scar in alopecia. These include lichen planopilaris, discoid lupus erythematosus, folliculitis decalvans, dissecting cellulitis of the scalp, frontal fibrosing alopecia, and central centrifugal psychiatrical alopecia. Moving on to tinea capitis, also known as scalp ringworm. This condition is a fungal infection of the scalp that mainly affects children. Tinea capitis causes hair to fall out in patches, which may get bigger over time. The affected areas often look red or scaly, and the scalp may be itchy. A child with this condition may have swollen glands in the back of the neck or low-grade fever as a result of the immune system fighting the infection. Moving on to anagen effluvium, which is a type of hair loss caused by medical treatments such as chemotherapy. The medication kills cancer cells but also shuts down hair follicle production. Anagen effluvium hair loss is rapid and can affect all head and body hair in men and women. However, after the chemotherapy ends, hair usually regrows without requiring any treatment. Moving on again to telogen effluvium. This type of hair loss is quite common, and it occurs when a large number of scalp hair follicles enter the resting phase of the hair growth cycle and the next hair growth cycle doesn't begin. This type of hair loss can affect men and women, and although you can lose between 300 and 500 hairs a day, this hair loss condition doesn't lead to complete baldness. Now moving on to hypotrichosis, which is a rare genetic condition where very little hair grows on the scalp and body. Babies born with this condition may have typical hair growth at first, but after a few months, their hair falls out and is replaced with thin and sparse hair. Many people with this condition are bald by 25 years old, but there are medications available to thicken and regrow hair. Finally, there are hair shaft abnormalities which can lead to hair loss. These conditions cause strands of hair to thin and weaken, causing them to break. The follicles themselves don't break, instead the break occurs somewhere along the visible part of the hair strand, known as the hair shaft. Changing the way you treat and style your hair can reverse some hair shaft abnormalities, whilst other conditions may require medical intervention. Now I'm going to list and describe the different types of hair shaft abnormalities. Firstly, there's loose anagen syndrome, which is when hair can be pulled out easily because it's not firmly rooted in the follicle. This condition is most common in children, especially girls with blonde or brown hair. Loose anagen syndrome tends to improve greatly once the child hits puberty. Another hair shaft abnormality is trichotillomania, which is a self-inflicted hair shaft abnormality where the sufferer feels the urge to pull their hair out. The hair often returns once the person stops pulling out their hair. According to my research, the best treatment for this hair loss condition is psychotherapy if the person cannot control the urge to pull out their hair. The other hair shaft abnormality is traction alopecia, which is when hair is pulled away from the scalp, damaging hair strands and causing hair to fall out because of your hairstyle. Hairstyles that can cause this condition are tight ponytails and braids. This hair loss doesn't occur right away, but rather over a period of years. Once you change your hairstyle, the hair usually regrows. However, it is better if you change your hairstyle sooner rather than later. So then, what have I learned from my hair loss journey, and what advice do I have to people who are experiencing hair loss? Well, firstly, I would say that if you begin to notice any hair loss, be honest and admit it, rather than just trying to ignore it or pretend like it's not happening. And this goes for, as well, in case anyone asks about your hair loss, admit that you're losing hair to them, because hair loss is nothing to be embarrassed or ashamed about. And I truly believe that honesty is definitely the best policy when it comes to dealing with hair loss. Once you've accepted the fact that you are losing hair, I recommend that you get your hair loss condition diagnosed for a few reasons. Firstly, I've discovered 18 different types of hair loss, so the hair loss condition that you think you have may not be what you actually have. Also, I think it's important to get your hair loss condition diagnosed if you want to treat your hair loss, because some medications and some treatments only work for specific types of hair loss. I also feel that it is important that you get your hair loss condition diagnosed, because you can then research into your hair loss condition to find out more about it. For example, how it could change and affect you in the future. It was so rewarding when I got my hair loss condition diagnosed, because I could then learn more about it, and if people asked me about it, I could then answer their questions. One of the highlights of my hair loss journey was getting my hair loss condition diagnosed, because now I finally knew what type of hair loss I had, so I could research more into my hair loss condition to discover different treatments available, and I could get sound quality advice about my hair loss condition from dermatologists and other people with alopecia areata, and I could finally explain my hair loss to anybody who asked about it. Once you've identified what type of hair condition you have, it is then up to you whether you want to treat, disguise, or embrace your hair loss. There is no right or wrong choice, because people respond to hair loss in different ways, so do whatever you feel is best for you. And don't let anyone else choose or dictate how you deal with your hair loss, because it's your hair, so that means it must be your choice. And this goes for parents of children who are experiencing hair loss as well. Now, I absolutely recommend that you give your children options on how they can manage their hair loss, but it must be their decision on which method they choose, because it is their hair and it should be their choice. The most important thing when dealing with hair loss is that you take control of your hair loss so it doesn't impact you negatively. I believe that you can take control of your hair loss through treatment, disguising it, and definitely embracing it. Do whatever you feel is best for you. But just remember, especially if you want to treat your hair loss, take up research into whatever you want to use to treat your hair loss, to find out if it will actually work for your hair loss condition and any side effects it may have. And also, whatever treatment you choose, give it at least 6 months of using it as prescribed before you give up. I only really gained control of my hair loss when I was in my mid-teens. When I was younger, I didn't really think about my hair loss much because I couldn't see it, and when I first learned about it, it was presented to me in a positive way, so I thought about it in a positive way. That was up until, as I said earlier, I began getting verbally bullied in comprehensive school about my hair loss. That's when I lost complete control of my hair loss, and I was worrying about disguising it or treating it and finding out about it to make myself look better to please other people. But after I got my diagnosis and I began learning about alopecia areata, I joined a support group, which definitely helped the way I viewed my hair loss, and it gave me some good advice too. And I also found researching my hair loss condition to see how it may affect me in the future and what different treatments are available very rewarding. So what have I done physically to take control of my hair loss? I have gone down the disguise route by growing my hair longer and changing my hairstyle to try and disguise my hair loss, as you can see. And I'm happy with the way it looks now, which is definitely the most important thing. So never make fun of someone who is experiencing hair loss, because it's really nothing to make fun of, and it's nothing funny about it. And there's nothing wrong with hair loss either, whatever hair loss you may have. So don't believe that you can't take control of your hair loss, because you can. Just remember, if you want to treat your hair loss especially, do your research on whatever you intend to use to find out if it actually works for your hair loss condition and if it has any side effects. And also, if you're using treatments, give them at least 6 months of using them as prescribed before you give up, because it takes that long to see noticeable results. At the moment, my hair loss is quite minimal, but even if I do lose more hair in the future, I will be prepared on how I will deal with it. I used to think I was suffering from hair loss, but ever since I got my diagnosis and I found support, I no longer suffer from it. Instead, I just merely experience hair loss. And that's the outcome that you should aim for, to be in control of your hair loss so it no longer affects you negatively and that you look the way you want to look, regardless of what type of hair loss you have.